Good morning, Middle Church. Good morning. What I want to talk to you about today is what this transformed city, the New Jerusalem, means to me. What does it mean to live our lives knowing that God lives with us, that God is our neighbor, our friend, our family, ourselves, that God is the stranger too, that God especially is the stranger. Here in the New Jerusalem as we here at Middle envision it, there are no strangers. And because I'm a writer, for me, what makes people not be strangers is knowing their stories, reading their stories, hearing their stories. Their stories help me feel my way into their lives, and my stories, I hope, help them feel their way into mine. In this New Jerusalem, everyone really hears each other's stories, and everyone knows that if they tell their authentic story, they will be heard. Here is mine. My grandmother, my Chinese-American grandmother, Charlotte Wong Liu, or Charlotte Chum Liu, or Liu Chum, or just Liu, depending on which documents you are looking at, was one of the most talkative, straightest talking, strongest woman I've ever known. I loved her so very much. I was also sometimes afraid of her. If she had an opinion about something, you knew it. I knew that when I got accepted into Yale that Harvard was a good school, and why hadn't I gotten in? I knew that when I gained the freshman 15 that I'd gotten fat, but that was good because I was too skinny before. I knew that if I ever went into the restaurant business that I should put the white people in the seats by the windows so that the tongs, the Chinese Cosa Nostra, wouldn't shoot the windows out. And I knew when I started reading Asian American literature on my own, because it wasn't in the curriculum, and asked her about the first Chinese American poets who wrote and published their Songs of Gold Mountain from the mid-19th century onward, that we were too busy doing laundry to write poetry, a slap on the wrist of the college-educated know-it-all, if I ever heard one. In case it's not clear, my grandmother was a force of nature. She was beautiful, smart, and elegant, and she never pulled a verbal punch. But I knew from the way she looked at me whenever I had something true to say, a look that was calm and attentive, her usually sharp black eyes suffused with love, that she was absorbing every word. My grandmother was nothing if not a talker, so it was a shock when my brother and I, in high school ourselves, discovered her high school yearbook. In those days, under the photo and name of each graduate was a motto. Under my grandmother's photo and name were these words: "Silence is golden." Silence is golden? My brother Kenny started to laugh. "You've got to be kidding, Grandma," he said. Silent? When were you ever silent? She paused. Her solemn look meant she was weighing her words before she spoke them. It was the look she got whenever she wasn't sure if we were old enough to hear what she was about to say. Finally, she said, "You never told white people what you were really thinking." My half-white brother and I, stunned into silence ourselves, couldn't ask her why. I had to learn for myself again by reading and researching the stories that hadn't made it into our high school history books, that my grandmother had reasons for her self-protective golden silence. The reasons began before she was born. Her grandfather, who had helped to build the northern branch of the Transcontinental Railroad, had had to flee with his second wife to the East Coast, to Baltimore, where they eventually ended up, to escape anti-Chinese violence. They could have been killed, as many were. They could have seen their house and their neighbors' houses or whole neighborhood torched to the ground, as happened in Tacoma, Washington. They could have been rounded up, and though they were US citizens by then, with the authentic papers to prove it, they could have been marched by the hundreds onto a ship and deported against their will to China, as happened in Seattle. My Chinese American family and I bear the intergenerational memory, which is to say, we bear the memory written in our flesh that the Americans wanted us dead or forcibly gone. There are other reasons for the silence. My grandmother's husband, my grandfather, like so many others, illegally immigrated from China as a paper son. False citizenship papers were one of the only ways to circumvent the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Asian Exclusion Act, which were more or less in effect until 1965. He eventually lived a public life as the debonair owner of the successful Freeman Chum's Chinese restaurant on Lexington Avenue, a restaurant visited by Marilyn Monroe, among other stars. But my grandfather also was the man who could not go to the hospital where his younger brother lay dying because they didn't have the same family name, and as an illegal alien, an excluded stranger in this land, he faced arrest and deportation. These are the people I am from. Their story is one strand in the story of Chinese America, one strand in the story of Asian America, which is one strand in the story that is all of us. Be a part of the breaking of the golden silence. Let's work together to make the new Jerusalem, buildings, affordable housing to live in, not walls to keep people out. The new Jerusalem is made of stories, one brick, one story at a time. Listen to the stories, deeply listen, then tell yours.